I'll now open the public hearing. The mayor, I'm filling in for the mayor. She's back in D.C. with the United Front, pressing for money for projects that we'd like to see developed here. So you get me tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to the assistant manager for an introduction to the topic.
Thank you, Councilor Brown, and good evening, Council. Tonight's public hearing is really on the infill compatibility standards. You'll remember we initiated this package of code amendments a while back as part of Envision Eugene, and it relates to multifamily housing. The purpose is to make changes and clarifications to the land use code that will improve neighborhood livability and implement strategies identified through Envision Eugene. The ordinance before you represents the Planning Commission's unanimous recommendation. I think we should just open it up, and then if there's questions afterwards, we can address those.
Sure, thank you. I'll call the speakers up. Those wishing to speak during this public hearing should have already submitted a completed request to speak form to the information desk by the door there. If you wish to speak and you've not already done so, please submit that form now. When you come up to speak, please give your name and address when you come to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to comment. The timer and lights on the podium indicate the time you have to speak. A yellow light will come on when you have 15 seconds to complete your comments. The red light indicates the end of the 3 minutes, and that's time for you to wrap it up. So the first speaker is Carolyn Jacobs, followed by Teresa Bichel.
Carolyn Jacobs, 2040 Agate Street. So this past weekend was beautiful in Eugene. Washburn Park across from where I live was filled with people sunbathing, reading, eating, playing Frisbee, basically reveling in a chance to be outside. But ironically, the densest housing projects in Eugene are not required to provide any open space. In fact, developers are rewarded for maxing out their property by not having to provide amenities like open space. In other words, no place to gather, no place to socialize, no place to hang out, call it what you will. Most cities do it the other way around. The bigger you build, the more amenities you must provide. And Portland here is an excellent model. Now, if you were enjoying the nice weather in your own yard this weekend and your property abutted the R3 boundary, perhaps on Emerald Street in our neighborhood, then your yard could very well be sided by a wall 150 feet long, 50 feet high, and only 5 feet back from your shared property line, with, of course, windows and balconies overhanging your yard. Privacy would certainly not be a part of your experience. Now, this situation can easily be addressed by a step it back as you step it up kind of policy, a design requirement which would buffer the next-door neighbors so we might have both a viable R1 and a viable R3. The clear goal for those of us who live south of the university is to discourage residents from fleeing what we think of as a model 20-minute neighborhood, where recent census data shows that 46% of the residents walk or ride their bikes to work, as compared with merely 12.5% citywide. What we envision is a diverse population which is able to enjoy, all of which is able to enjoy the place they call home. And with that vision, I feel like we've come full circle, because more than 4 years ago, actually February 2008, a very widely representative ICS task team put forth as their goal, encourage residential infill that would enhance the stability, quality, and positive character and livability of residential neighborhoods. Today you have, I believe, both the opportunity and the responsibility to move the city in that direction. 2 of the half a dozen code amendments you can support include making open space an integral part of every multifamily project and slope setbacks the norm of every project along the R1, R3 interface. The other 4 code changes are equally important and equally well crafted, and they're all urgently needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Teresa Bichel, followed by Dane Butler.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Bishop, reside in South Eugene, work for Arley and Company at 2911 Tennyson Avenue. I'm here tonight first to express appreciation to you and the staff for the hard work on the infill compatibility standards. Since we provided testimony to the Planning Commission, a number of significant improvements were made. So I will focus my comments on areas of concern that we still have. First, in general, if you're trying to provide open space per project, such as in the developed neighborhoods of Eugene, having clear standards that are adjusted might be the best approach. In the case of the nodal development areas, however, we would really request not being subject to the same standards because of the additional requirements for density and the similarity with downtown. We're trying to provide a vibrant mixed-use area that supports job growth, housing choices, environmental stewardship, at a density that supports transit. So as your draft ordinance eliminates open space for the heart of the community, I just encourage you to do the same for the nodal development areas for consistency and equitable treatment. So that's the first point in the written material that I've just distributed. If you do retain the open space requirements for nodal development, we just have some additional points in here for you to consider. In addition, there are some expansion of these standards after the Planning Commission hearing that suddenly apply to R3 and R4 areas. One of them, such as having special standards that on the surface look like they're addressing driveways for R3 and R4, but what they do is impose standards on single-family homes in R3 and R4. And single-family homes are challenging at the densities for urban areas, and we need every bit of flexibility possible. So I just suggest eliminating those provisions. Photos aren't very good in the packet I just handed out, but maybe you get the idea. The final point I really urge you to make, and I really believe the City Council has this authority and latitude, when you enact code provisions that are this profound or encompassing, please allow your existing, especially the recent apartments that have been built that conform to the code today. If you do nothing but adopt this ordinance, many of them will instantly become legal, non-conforming, and that's the key word, non-conforming buildings. The ability for the appraiser, the banker, the investor to maintain those buildings at the quality the neighborhoods want. They want them well maintained. Will just go away if they're non-conforming.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Next is Dane Butler, followed by Ed McMahon.
Hello, Dane Butler, 3396 Amherst Way, the North Gillum neighborhood. I've been somewhat familiar with this discussion. This discussion coming about from Ed McMahon. The single-family residence in the R3 and R4 did catch me a little by surprise. We've been building on a current R4 development that has a lot of great features that could be subject to this provision and may need to be eliminated, which are very popular and I would say a very friendly amenities of front patios, front porches that are really inviting to the neighborhood. And when we're trying to develop these denser, I call them a denser neighborhood where you really get to know your neighbors a little better, some of these features is what makes the neighborhood kind of special. And these provisions, I think, in one aspect, you're not trying to eliminate them, but in the wording of it does, such as an extra patio or an extra walkway to get you to a back courtyard area or certain things like that in the wording of this could be eliminated on single-family residences, which I don't think is the goal of this ordinance. So I would just say that really keeping in mind that single-family, not just multifamily development is vastly impacted by these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ed McMahon, followed by Bill Aspergren.
Council, thank you for this opportunity. Ed McMahon, Executive Director of the Home Builders Association of Lane County, 1065 River Road. The main point that I'd like to stress tonight is that you've received some very well-written testimony about these infill compatibility code standards, and I really suggest you take a good close look at them, because right now they're not where they need to be. Some wordsmithing and some things could take care of a lot of the problems. And the primary concern that I have is that code amendments like this get us to the point to where some of the Envision Eugene pillars are in conflict with each other. And we need to be able to find the balance to eliminate that conflict. And being a member of the TRG, that's been very important to me. And the Envision Eugene process started with the Community Resource Group. And then the Technical Resource Group took it and vetted that material and got down in the weeds and cleaned things up and got us to a plan to where I believe it can work. I suggest we did the same thing with these infill compatibility code standards. It needs to be vetted more than it has been. I appreciate the work that's been done. It's not completed. We have problems right now. We need to work together. I feel like we can find a consensus, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Bill Aspergren.
I think I'll keep this brief. I've been working on these standards through ICS and also with the staff here for the last, 3 years or so. It's taken a long time and a lot of work by many people to get these code amendments to this point. 3 of them, the open space one, the intrusions, and driveways and parking, were all proposed by the ICS project. The ICS task team proposals were put on hold 2.5 years ago, with the majority of the changes still unimplemented due to the perceived more urgent priority of Envision Eugene. And even with these, there's still a lot of ICS issues that haven't been dealt with. Unfortunately, incompatible development has continued. Over a year ago, the neighbors urged the city to start looking at code changes again. Then 3 additional changes were added: the garbage screening, the bike parking, and the stepping down from R3, R4 to R1. All of these changes were well thought out and well vetted. It's important, and they're important to enhance the livability of our neighborhoods. You could argue that by these code amendments may chip away at the ability of developers to put together a viable project, but I think you also have to understand that they are chipping away. Without these amendments, it's chipping away at the viability and livability of our neighborhoods. I think these amendments will result in a more compatible and definitely more desirable developments in our neighborhood. Those of us who have worked on these changes during the past few years, and it has been several years now, feel they are critical to our neighborhoods and urge you to put them into effect quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll ask if councilors have any comments or any questions for staff. No? I don't see any. Now I have a...
one.
Uh-oh, sorry. Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to the people who came to talk. I think it is way past time that we do something about infill compatibility. As the last speaker said, we've continued to see it happen, incompatible building happen over the years, more and more of it. And these provisions seem to make a lot of sense there. I do have a question about, we got a suggestion about increasing the bike parking for more than 3 dwellings. Could you comment on that?
Absolutely. So one of the original, in the original drafts, staff was proposing that for a multifamily development, so apartments with 3 or more units in the university area, currently they're required to provide 1 required parking space per apartment unit. regardless of the number of bedrooms. And staff was proposing kind of an increase of, if you had 3 or more bedrooms, you would have to provide an additional bike parking space. So if you had 5 bedrooms, you would have to provide 2 bike parking spaces instead of 1. The Planning Commission voted to not go forward with that particular recommendation. Their thought at the time was that there are going to be some bike parking amendments coming forward kind of as an outcome of the city's pedestrian and bicycle master plan, and they thought it would be better to have a comprehensive review of that time of the different types of bike needs.
So that in the meantime, any development would not be required to put
They would have required to be one
one per unit.
Yes.
I hope that we will have an opportunity to make an amendment to change that, right?
Yes.
And when would be the time to do that? When we,
Well, on May 14th is when action is currently scheduled, although that's a pretty busy night, so hopefully we get to it. I think typically before that time, you work with staff to craft what you would like your amendment to be.
thank you. And can you explain about the driveway requirement that someone objected to?
Absolutely, and I forgot to introduce myself, Alyssa Hansen with Planning, if you don't remember me. Yes, so one of the proposals is to require, or actually do some limitations on driveways in parking in the R3 and R4 zones, and those are our limited high density and our high density zone. And this is an issue that we see mostly around campus, where there may be an existing single-family home on these high-density zones on a lot, and a developer comes to add a second house or to turn that into a duplex or to add a new duplex. So they're not reaching the threshold of needing to meet our multifamily standards, which only apply for 3 or more units. And they're allowed to pave up to 50% of their street frontage. So if they have a corner lot and 100 feet of street frontage, they could have 50 feet of paving. These would limit the amount of paving to a certain width and a certain depth, and not allow kind of the angled parking we're seeing in front yards, taking up front yards and open space in those areas. They are really crafted to apply mostly to the university area. However, the Planning Commission asked that they apply citywide, because I think we're going to, it's possible that we start to see some in other core areas around town where we have those smaller lots, and we're seeing, single-family homes and duplexes being built in those zones.
I've seen concrete take up an entire front yard. And so we're going to prevent that in the future?
Well, this
maybe?
would apply in the R3 and R4 zones only, and
But
only...
not in the R1?
Correct.
Perhaps we should do something about that. There's too much impervious surface being
Well,
created.
you would be happy to know that as part of Envision Eugene is that one of the code amendments is to be looking at the infill compatibility standards that relate to the single-family homes, and lot coverage and impervious surface is one of those topics.
And that will be coming up how soon?
That I can't
A
tell.
few years?
I hope not.
Okay. And what was the complaint or the reference to a walkway to the back part of?
I am not sure. I haven't spoken with that person. I think maybe the concern was because we're limiting paving, although it's called driveways and parking areas. I guess there could be a concern that if somebody wanted to add some paving along the side of the house, that probably make sure that we wouldn't consider that driveway or a parking area. And there's a provision in that section that allows for a walkway from the sidewalk to the front of the house, and we wanted to make sure there was a separation between the driveway and that pathway, because we have seen cases where they put the pathway next to the driveway and it really becomes an extension. It just makes that driveway wider. So we wanted to make sure that there really was a walkway and somebody wasn't trying to get around the rules.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, well, I'm going to close the hearing in a second, but I want to ask councilors about extending the public record for 7 or 14 days. I'll do that after I close the hearing.
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay.
14.
Did you close the hearing?
I'll not close the hearing.
There's actually a motion and a second. We don't need to vote on it, but since there's a motion and a second, we want to vote on whether we're closing the hearing. Is that your motion?
Keep the record open. Keep the record open.
Okay. Then, so the, you close.
I've closed it, I've closed the hearing.
Do you want to be more specific, keep the record open for how long?
14.
I
14.
think
7 or
we-
14 is the
14
practice.
days.
Yeah.
14, and yeah.
Okay, so, and we have a second. So do we need to vote, or do you have direction to leave the hearing open?
See if that works with your next scheduled date to review this. When are they going to
On May 14th.
So the record is open for a couple weeks, that's sufficient time for staff to draft.
Hold on, I didn't bring the calendar up with me. Can you tell me what date it is in,
That's
Well,
4
it may,
weeks. It'll be 4 weeks from tonight that we have this discussion.
It'll be the 30th.
That's plenty of time.
that should be sufficient.
If it's not, we may push it back a little bit.
Do we need to take a formal vote, or,
There's a motion, you have to take a vote.
okay, all right.
You're closing it on the 30th or on the 20th?
We'll close it on,
Is the intention to leave it open for 2 weeks or really 14 days? So if we close it on Friday, the 27th, then that would give a
normally,
amount of time.
yeah, I mean, normally we would do a full 14 days. We would say at 5 o'clock on Monday, April 30th.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so the record will remain open for written testimony that can be directed to Alyssa Hanson until Monday, April 30th at 5 o'clock. And we'll provide any staff responses after that.
Thank you.
Do I need to do anything here to?
Just
Is
push
that
the
just
button.
which one? I did mine, I voted. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. We're done.
Yes, it's been closed. I'll close it again. Oh, I'll close the meeting of the council.
We're all closed now.
Did they actually vote?
Thank you.
And I missed it? They did.